I don't think it's just nothing. Like, I don't think it's just some, like, goobers flying drones out there.
Greetings and welcome to the Unrefined Podcast. I am Brandon Spain, your host on this journey through the mysterious, the unexplained, and the supernatural, all viewed through the lens of biblical truth. Connect with us and gain access to exclusive content at unrefinedpodcast.com. Now, for this week's episode. Hey, everyone. Today's conversation is out of this world, quite literally. We're diving into Project Bluebeam, the mysterious world of UAPs and the alien deception narrative, all while tying into the current buzz around advanced drones. It's a fascinating mix of technology, conspiracy, and biblical insight that'll have you questioning what's really going on behind the scenes. It does me. Guess what, friends? We've got a special guest joining us today, someone who's practically family around here. We always love these deep, insightful conversations with a biblical twist, and today's episode is no exception. So if you're thinking it's our dear friend from Eyes on the Right, you guessed it. Amy is back. Amy's back.
Aww,
yes.
Hello.
Yep.
Welcome to the show.
Hey, Amy.
Hey,
Hey, guys. All right. Yeah.
Hey, guys. I just wanted to say thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It's always fun.
Yeah. It is. It's awesome. I've been thinking, like, what can we talk to Amy about? And then I was looking through your podcast and you talked about this on an episode. And I'm like, this would be really good to talk about again with the whole drone thing and bring that in too. And throw out some speculation and theories because we've heard so much just disinformation, maybe true information and all that. We'll get into that. I've watched some videos, Amy, and I'm gonna start out with Bluebeam if that's all right with you.
Sure.
I've watched some videos, done some research on Project Bluebeam, but it's like I hear different things from different people. One person I'll hear that it's strictly only a governmental type thing, and then other people I'll hear that it's a governmental, but there is some extra dimensional or interdimensional beings involved, and and you hear all this stuff. So lay out for us like what you've researched and what you think Project Bluebeam is, what it's for, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
Project Bluebeam is an interesting, it would be labeled as a conspiracy theory, right? Like if you were to Google search it, but
like a false flag kind of thing.
That from what and so it's really dubbed under that whole conspiracy theory, like don't believe this is a hoax, etc. But from my understanding, what Project Bluebeam is utilizing potentially AI, satellites, imagery, right? I don't know how all of that works. You guys might know a little bit better how they make these hologram images, but I find it really interesting with all of the satellites up that Elon Musk has put. Could that potentially play into this as some sort of like a laser show type thing with Project Bluebeam? And it really, I think it potentially could be something that could create something in the skies to mimic like an alien invasion or something of the sort. Many of you have seen, listening, and I know you guys have seen the holographic images that have been showing up at outdoor events. And do they look real? It looks like I've seen ones where like demon-like creatures are coming out of the sky, UFOs with, people coming down out of the UFOs or aliens or whatever you want to call it. But it looks so lifelike that I think that this could potentially be part of an objective for just, kind of some deception in the coming days.
Amy, is this like festivals? Is this like what kind of gatherings are you talking about here for the... I'd not heard of that, honestly.
Yeah, I have a couple on my page, and one was like an outdoor like mall type festival thing. I don't know. I can't remember exactly what it was. Large gatherings, large people there coming for an event or maybe even a concert or sorts, but they've been showing up all over the world. And you've even seen some of these DJs who do some of this AI holographic stuff. You guys seen those? You're nodding your head. So I feel like it's all interconnected. And really, I mean, it's conditioning us to look up. It's conditioning us to expect something from the skies to appear. That's my personal opinion.
Well, and it's permeated everything. We're watching a Christmas movie and aliens get brought into it. They're not
Yeah,
a big part of it, but it's everywhere. And this is the big thing I just want to interject too. We're seeing those things. I saw them on some of your reels and stuff. And like something you would see at the Olympics with, like or a Super Bowl with all this big stuff and everything. And we all know, I mean, this is conspiracy fact that DARPA and these other agencies have technology 20, 30, 40 years ahead of what we're seeing. So
right.
imagine what they have that they could do stuff with.
Totally. Yeah. Spot on.
Do you have any ideas like the origin of this or when this came about or kind of the history behind this or anything?
I don't have a whole lot that in terms of the origin and things like that. I do know that this was something, I believe even books were written about, where it was just this idea of a coming deception utilizing these technologies to bring the public into just, like I said, a deception to lead them into the agenda, said agenda, whether that's the alien agenda, whether it's they're here to help us, whether it's a control aspect or all of the above. I don't know. What have you guys researched in terms of the findings or the starting points?
When you look up Project Bluebeam on, and this isn't going to be surprising, Wikipedia, it just takes you to the page for the entry for this guy named Serge
Mhm.
Monast, this Quebecois conspiracy theorist, and it's like one paragraph about Beam, and then just the rest of it denouncing him as a conspiracy theorist. So that should tell you that just what you're going to get on kind of the things like Wikipedia and Google searches. I would imagine won't be much more helpful.
Well,
Right. Yeah, go
I'll
ahead.
tell you this, one of my favorite guys, I follow him more for political commentary kind of stuff and he's hilarious too, is a guy named Mark Dice, and he dives into our world too with conspiracies. And he has really two good videos on Project Bluebeam. One he did like, I think 11 years ago, and he was talking about it 11 years ago. And then another one that's come out more recently in the last year or so. And he is of the type, even though he's a Christian and he believes, I think, in the supernatural and stuff, he just kind of thinks that Project Bluebeam is all a governmental thing, that there's no supernatural elements involved in it at all or anything like that. So, I mean, that I try to, when I do research, I try to like get all the different sides to stuff. It's natural, it's supernatural, and I'm just really confused in a lot of ways because in our circles, there's people saying that aliens are extra dimensional beings and they don't come from other planets. There's people that are saying, no, 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 they really are people from other planets and they're malevolent, but they're still from other planets. And then you have people that are saying it's a full blown alien, they're all underground and all this kind of stuff. And there's so many different variations of it. And I've kind of come to sit and I'm definitely willing to be persuaded differently because this is so up in the air to me, is that I believe that there's aliens out there. I don't think they have visited our Earth yet. I mean, why would God only create one world? I'm kind of a C.S. Lewis guy when it comes to that. Why would God only make one world? And that's just my shade tree theology. I have no biblical understanding to back that up, really. However, I do think we are experiencing quote aliens, but they're aliens to our dimension, not necessarily to our world. I do think that's what a lot of people are seeing in there, and so I do believe in aliens in that sense. So that's kind of where I sit.
Yeah. Well, are we talking about now are we kind of shifting into what has been seen in New Jersey and all the likes, like the in quote drones, and is that what you're kind of alluding to, Brandon?
Yeah, yeah, because I
Yeah.
mean, I sent BT something the other day, a guy, and to me it made a lot of sense, but he just ripped it apart, which is good. That's why we all three of us, I mean, with all three of us, we have like two brain cells, so we can really get some stuff accomplished. And I'm serious. I'll send something to Lindsay, and he'll and we'll poke holes in it, which is good. That's I think how we need to be as this, because if we just believe everything that comes down the pipe, we're going to be number one confused. We're going to confuse other people because I do believe podcasters are a form of teaching. And when we put information out there, we need to do our due diligence because people believe what we say.
Yeah.
And that's not an
Absolutely.
arrogant thing. That's just a reality thing.
Yeah.
And so I want to be super careful, like the biblical admonition to, not put false teaching. Does that mean everything I say is right or we say is right? Absolutely not. We do the 70-30 rule from NT Wright, and or 80-20. Yeah, I might give myself 20 anyway. But I don't understand what's going on with the drones, and we can even go into one of the theories that we heard that BT wrapped. I mean, he wrapped up a neat bow and kicked it through a field goal. I mean, it was so good. But so, what have you been hearing, Amy? You're our guest. What have you been hearing about the drones? What are your viewpoints of that?
Well, I love your perspective, you guys, because I think you're absolutely right. Number one, we do have our due diligence to people listening to try to bring forth as best as we can the information in a way that's discerning and God inspired. And so that's why I appreciate you guys and your podcast so much, because there is so much disinformation. And so we've talked about this a lot, on here is watch, wait, pray, sit back, don't take everything as a dogmatic, approach where you're like, oh yeah, this is what it is. And as I was watching this drone stuff, clearly I came up with a few things. Number one, they want to be seen. So you can tell that whenever it's pushed out, when it's in the skies, people are recording it. If these are truly government, technology, and they are trying to do it under the veil of darkness to gather information on radioactive material, I think that was one of the theories, then why do they want to be seen? Now, I know there's lights on the drones, et cetera, and that can be part of it, but there is still that objective of they want to be seen. And number two is there is everything that's pushed out in the algorithms and social media is there by, in quote, them. They want this pushed out in the algorithms for X amount of reasons.
Yeah.
I think when they do this, it's not just a single objective that is trying to be accomplished. I think that when they do these types of things like the drones, there is multiple objectives that are being met. Confusion, confusion in the public. They're gathering information on how the public is reacting. They are, just like 2020, that was a test run. Yep. So they're trying to collect data on how the people are going to react. It's an introduction to, like you said, aliens, UFOs, UAPs. So they're priming the public to look up in the skies, to get used to these types of things. Because in my opinion, and you see this on the WEF, you see it in movies and priming, you see it with Elon Musk saying, tweeting out, hey, get ready for the drone wars. They are priming us and preparing us for something. So that's kind of my opinion with the drones. And I know there's been other videos that, and this is where I'll kind of end on my spiel, but there's been other videos like the example from, I think it was a Fox News station. And this person was zooming in on what looked like to me a star, because when you look at a Nikon P900 or 1000, when you zoom in on the stars, they look like orbs. They look like something that, like a reflection of a pool almost, when you see that like moving kind of frequency, for lack of another word. So you're seeing different things. And I think that's part of it too. It's a multifaceted approach to tick off boxes of multiple objectives.
And this is exactly what I agree with. This is a psychological operation.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen so many of these. And if I were to just say simply that they can't really come up with any new ideas. It's the same system repeating itself with newer technology. We had the Red Scare with the communists between like 1947 to 57. And then we had the stuff going on with Project Blue Book, which would have been, what's that, 51 or 52 to 60 something. I can't remember. We've got MK Ultra in our history. And then it's like the Gulf of Tonkin event, right? Like I've gone so far as to say that the drones is basically a Gulf of Tonkin event. And then you got members of Congress going, oh, it's probably Iran, right? I mean, it's just psychological there. But what really bothers me the most is what happened way back in the late 50s to the early 70s. And that was COINTELPRO. And that was basically the FBI targeting civil rights groups, anti-war activists, etc., and spreading false information about them, causing more division.
Yeah.
And so when we start looking at psychological operations, one of the biggest things that they're going to do is it's confusing elements, right? Amy, we have people saying that it's craft from Iran or China, and then you have people going, oh, it's just, people with millions of dollars and they're just goofing around, and it's always confusing. And we should always recognize a psyop for a psyop when it's the news that's covering up a global event. Something's going on that's big in the world, and we should be paying attention to it. And then it just goes away. It's like the flavor of the month news story.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when it's
Totally.
like that, I compared the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial to a psychological operation, right? I mean, we really needed to know about that when there was actual government
Real
trials
news.
of corruption going on in the United States. That nope, let's focus on the Depp and Heard situation. So it's all like this. And that's where I'm gonna fall. Is it's a psychological operation. Yes, they're data collecting. They're seeing what people have to say, and of course,
Yeah. Well, let's for a second, BT. Let's cue Amy and Lindsay in on our little discussion we had. I got hold of a video, and I don't know if anybody else did. And I'm not going to name who it is or anything like that because this guy's. I mean, it's a great, yeah. But his viewpoint, his viewpoint was basically, and he didn't come right out and say it, but there's some actors with a lot of money. I'll leave it like that. That are basically doing these drones to show the country that we're not ready for attack, that we're not, the word that they used was like they're trying to nationalize the airspace. And to me, when I was listening to it, it sounded like a lot like on the QAnon stream is what I was picking up or
he was
feeling.
saying that we didn't have an air defense system that could knock these things out of the sky.
And when I listened to it, it made sense. But then I sent it to my Navy bud, and he's like, this guy's not right. Just talked about all the things. You can go over it, BT. What are some of the things that stuck out to you about it? You remember?
Well, yeah, there's a handful of things that happen. So if the United States doesn't have an air defense system, then what did we deploy on 9/11 off the Navy Marine base that I was stationed at? We had surface-to-air missile systems set up across various areas. I mean, it's just no. We had jets deployed that were loaded up with air-to-air missiles, etc., air-to-surface missiles, and the idea that the United States cannot defend itself against targets, foreign or domestic, is the most absurd argument you can hear. Mainly because we didn't shoot down the balloon from China that was floating overhead. Well, the thing is if you show your hand for a balloon, people don't spy on other countries unless they're looking for information. And if they can't find that information, they just move on. That's why we've got serious stuff that's built and designed in, we call it Area 51 or whatever, Dreamlands.
Yeah.
And, aircraft, the SR-71 Blackbird, the B-50, I mean, it's just like we have things that are being built and designed. We don't just show our hands to the countries to let them see that we've got. So we're not going to set out our surface-to-air missile systems just because there's a handful of drones flying around cities. Never mind those cities are defended with surface-to-air missiles.
Yeah. So yeah, that kind of shifted my viewpoint, Amy, of drones. Lindsay, what did you think? What are your insights into this?
I don't think it's just nothing. I don't think it's just some goobers flying drones out there. I find it interesting that some people will say just the idea that it's just the government doing stuff to them. Oh, just the government, no big deal. And that's they dismiss the whole thing. That makes it better. Obviously for us that makes it worse. But Tim Pool, for instance, every now and then I'll watch his live show as he gets more and more sus to me. But he was very dismayed. He was just like, yeah, it's just the government. There's documents to prove it. He didn't tell us what those documents were that I remember seeing. And yeah, this is just a government experiment. Boring, guys, boring. No, nothing to see here. And I'm just like, I couldn't tell you what exactly it is, but it's nothing good.
Well, it's almost like these aren't the droids you're looking for.
Yeah, well, the other thing the guy was talking about was the fact that the United States is somehow built upon a maritime law and that the Washington, D.C. is a ship. I've heard all these arguments with the gold fringe on the end of the flag and a handful of other things, and I think that's cuckoo for cuckoo puffs.
It's having a psychological effect on us regardless. I mean,
yeah, whatever it is.
Whoever's doing it.
Yeah.
So if it's not, someone nefarious will grab a hold of it and use it for their own ends. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think another aspect too that I kind of look at is you've got like UNICEF in 2021 talking about drones being utilized for public awareness, for gathering information. You have all these dystopian type movies coming out, and it's all about this constant surveillance of drones. You've got the 15-minute cities that are pushing the drones flying everywhere. Again, my stance is I mean, I think it falls in line with yours too, what all of you guys are saying. I think it's multifaceted. I think it's
Yeah.
preparing us and priming us to get used to this maybe in some aspects. You even saw like Amazon with the drones dropping off packages. So you've got that aspect too,
Yeah.
right? It's a way to collect data. It's a way to watch for, in quote, our safety, right? Lots of elements here from my perspective.
Well, and it echoes right now. I'm reading Annie Jacobson's book on Area 51, and I know she doesn't go too deep into the conspiracy stuff, but she does really scratch the surface really well. But I'm reading about the first U-2, and then I'm reading about the first spy plane that they did out at 51, and it seems like to me, but now it's shifted to drones. They found a better utility. Supposedly, the whole reason for that in Area 51 was basically to wage two forms of warfare. Number one, the nuclear standoff version. They wanted that, but then they also wanted to fly all over Russia and find as much stuff, which they actually did, and it really offended Khrushchev a lot. They took a picture of his stables with his horses or something like that and sent it to him. And anyway, but yeah, I think a lot of this is like both and. I think there's and reason I say that is because I understand how the government is set up. It's set up in compartmentalization. So one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. So one hand might think that they're getting ready for Iran and all these aggressors, and then the other hand really knows what's going on, like masonry.
Yeah.
You the low level people don't know what's going on until you get to the high level people, and they understand exactly what's going on. So yeah, I think it's more of a false flag type situation. And then the school shooting. I know this is not what we're talking about, but then the school shooting comes up. What an appropriate time for that. Another false flag type issue. And I don't mean to say that like I'm like people were hurt and were killed and all that. I'm not making light of that, but I posted on one woman's page. I'm like, "Are you awake yet?" And she took it well, but it's like, what are the odds that we have this right in the transition between this election and all this kind of stuff? Anyway, tell us about some of your theories about the UAP. There's so much out there, Amy. I would love for you just to kind of just lay out like what you believe about a lot of this kind of stuff and how involved are the aliens? What are the aliens? Are they, you got to show some cards today, which I know you don't mind. So, but
I don't mind at all.
Yeah. So,
yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating topic, albeit, I like what you guys said. We don't have all the answers. This is purely my educated guess, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
But from my research and from my just, time spent with people coming out of SRA, listening to testimonies, I can't help but think that there is a hybrid component to these aliens. I'm going to air quote. I'm just going to use that term because that's what people know. And immediately when you think aliens, what do you see? You see these gray creatures, like popping up. We've been very conditioned to see aliens for that because Hollywood has done a great job with that. And I think that's part of it. And I don't know, are they interdimensional? Is there a combination of both? Is it some technology that the government has that we just don't know about? Is it partly that? Is it partly interdimensional? Is it a combination of a few things? I mean, that's where I kind of land is like, I don't think we can be so cut and dry that like, oh yeah, it's definitely government or it's definitely, gray aliens from the Pleiades. Like, I think that there is, just like the example with the drones, you guys, it's multifaceted to cause confusion. So people are like, I don't know what's up and down. Like, what's going on? That's my take on it because it's a way to cause confusion, which would then enable the public to be controlled in a better way for their outcome and agenda that they want. Now, with the UAPs and the USOs, again, those are the fancy terms, unidentified,
Yeah, why did they change those? Why did they change those terms? Do you have a theory about that?
I don't know, but I know it's of recent that they have. The USOs are the unidentified submergible objects, and those I find really
Yeah.
fascinating too, just like
Yeah.
with the whole marine kingdom and the waters and all the things around
Yeah.
that.
Let's
But
go there later. Yeah.
okay,
Well,
go ahead.
to use unidentified aerial phenomena makes it ambiguous, and that's part of psychological warfare. Ambiguity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Ambiguity. So there's no real definitive, which I like that you mentioned that, BT, because you can apply that to so much of these so-called agendas, even with the gender inversion and all that. There's no definitive. It's a blurred line. You can be whatever you want to be. And so with all of this, your question was, what are my thoughts on it? I mean, I think it's definitely a priming. I think it's a way to get the public not only interested and intrigued in talking about it, because look at what everybody's talking about. Look at what's being pushed out there. We're all looking at the skies. We're wondering what these things are. We're video recording it, with our phones. And I think it's a priming. I think it's a getting the public excited about a certain topic. I think that it also causes fear. And we know that when people are fearful, they're going to be easily manipulated.
Easily.
So, I mean, that's kind of my just umbrella kind of response to that. But I don't know if you had any more specific questions that I didn't touch on.
Yeah. Well, what I'd like to talk to you, because you and I have been having dialogue and discussion about eschatology, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I really think that a lot of this is priming us for the end times
Mhm.
oriented type thing. No matter what you believe with that, there's going to be a time of deception. There's going to be an antichrist. So, and even if it wasn't, or even if the world was right, I mean, to me, it seems like that they're. I mean, what better could be the antichrist than for some aliens to come in like Independence Day and invade us, and then all of a sudden this super Nephilim esque creature comes. Okay, there's Thor comes and saves the day and wipes out all the alien race, and he now is going to set our nation. There's even a Twilight Zone back in the '60s that kind of alluded to this kind of situation. It's called. It's really funny. It's called "To Serve Man," and it's got a little twist at the end that they actually take all these humans back to eat to serve man. Like
I loved Twilight Zone.
yeah, we do it on New Year's. But anyway, but it has that same premise. These aliens come in and they're the saviors, and they set world hunger right. They make peace out of the United Nations, and honestly, that sounds like the devil's mo to me. I mean, uh, Jesus, and I'm not conflating Jesus' divinity here, but how much better for an antichrist to be half quote divine Elohim and half man?
Exactly.
So
Yeah, I totally agree. I think my 2 cents on that, when you look at scripture, all throughout scripture, from day one, it's about creation. And
mhm,
what is the devil trying to manipulate? Creation. It's all about climate change. It's about the fake clouds in the sky. It's about signs and wonders. He's constantly trying to manipulate creation, whether that's the trees and the skies and the stars, or mankind. Wouldn't it not be fitting for the enemy to utilize some sort of perverted idea of creation to manipulate people? I mean, the stars and wonders in the sky. And that's how God shows his power through creation, all throughout
yeah,
scripture, through the
yeah,
plagues, through the Red Sea. I mean, it's him showing that this is my creation. I'm going to show my power through it, bring about judgment, wrath, etc. And the enemy is going to try to do that as well. And that's where, like, Brandon, you and I have talked about eschatological stuff. And that's why I believe that it's very literal what happens in the end.
yeah,
I believe
yeah,
it's very literal. It's not symbolic,
yeah.
because of the common theme throughout scripture.
Yeah. My nuanced viewpoint is that there has been some symbolic things that have happened, but I see revelation, and we talked about this, the three of us, in a podcast earlier this week about repetition. Let me phrase that out. The book of Revelation it had a beginning, it's ongoing and it's cyclic, but it's also going to have an end. It's going to have a final cycle. And we can't erase that just because it's had cycles in between. We were talking about, it was Lindsay that came up with the fact that if you really look back, there's been multi-Tower of Babels throughout history. And I was like, man, that's mind blowing. And we were talking about some of those things, and we all started talking about it. And he's right. And so back to the book of Revelation. Yeah, the book of Revelation it's real, it's going to happen, but it also has cyclic thing that's been happening for thousands of years as well at the same time. And just like with the birth of Jesus, you had a fulfillment of the prophecy, but then later you had the incarnation fulfillment of the virgin birth. And I guess that's what I'm saying. We, particularly Westerners, we want everything neat, tight in a systematic little box, whereas the Hebrews, the Jews, even the Greeks, it was quite messy, quite multi-layered, quite, if I'm making sense. I mean, you can have allegories and literal in the scripture, obviously, and we don't need to make that choice. We need to say yes. We want both. We want both because they're both true. And one day there is going to be an antichrist that is going to deceive us, and it's going to usher in the new creation. That's going to happen. It's pretty obvious. So that's why I think full preterism is heresy. Partial, maybe not so much. I don't buy all of it. I buy some of it, but full preterism is heresy. It has been with the church for years. And so, Lindsay.
Well, I was just going back to the whole how this could play out in an end time scenario. I got the Reagan quote kind of queued up here from that speech he gave to the UN.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. This is out of context, obviously. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside the world. So
1980 what? 82, 83, something like that?
I mean, it was 87.
87.
So that's the other scenario, that someone steps in and defeats the alien threat, and then they're the man all of a sudden.
Yep. Well, and too, Amy, I agree with you in the sense too. If you're the enemy, you're going to say, "Oh, it's all been done. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here."
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely. And it just makes sense. Lindsay quoted the Reagan quote. You think about the priming that's been done in the movies and the cartoons and the comic books and all the things. And one standing alone is just circumstantial evidence, right? But when you start to gather all of these pieces together, the Reagan quote, the this, the that, it starts to formulate a picture that you have to consider if you're really looking at this. You do have to consider it and say, okay, wait a second, and Lord, give me the eyes to see this the way you want me to see it.
Yes.
And holding loosely still too, until he gives you a definitive. But it just all adds up to what we're saying in this end time scenario. It makes sense.
Well, and we have to think outside the box with categories. We have been given from the church certain categories. You're one of four things. And I just think we need to go back to the text and reevaluate and look at what the text says. I've actually heard people say, "Oh, you're not a dispensationalist, so therefore you're a heretic." I mean, that's insane. You can't say that. But we're saved by grace through faith. We're saved by Jesus's blood. We're saved by the cross. We're not saved by what I believe about the end times. But at the same time, we need to be open to like an amalgamation of all these different viewpoints and beliefs. I mean, all this stuff is happening for some kind of a reason. And God is so big. I think about this sometimes. He's so big that he plays like infinite D chess. And he knows everybody's decisions that everybody's going to make. And I believe in middle knowledge. So it's like yet there's something going on that we need to be aware of and we need to take account of. And the biggest thing to me that really is just the hook, line, and sinker is I have noticed in my lifetime, and I'm only 50s, but even in my lifetime, I've noticed how much stuff has changed in the past 20 years. It's going to some sort of trajectory. The Bible can really elucidate, can really lay that out, where that trajectory is going, and we need to believe what it says. Well, let's go to the what did you call them? USO, unidentified submersible objects.
Submergible, yeah.
So tell us about that. Tell us about the Marine Kingdom and all that stuff. I mean, we've hinted at it on the show with you before, but just kind of tell us about that.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, well, basically the USOs are just unidentified submergible objects that are able to go in the water and kind of navigate in the water. There's been sightings of that. Again, Netflix, I take it with a grain of salt, but sometimes there's some shows on there for research purposes,
Yep,
right?
definitely.
That I do tune into. And my husband and I were watching one, and it was really fascinating because they were identifying these submergible objects all across the world, and they were noting that these submergible objects were coming up from under the waters, but also able to traverse through the waters and then go into the air. So it's wild. I mean, is this a part of technology that is, just government sponsored technology, and created? Is it inspired by fallen angel technology? I don't know, but I
Mhm.
think there's a lot that are under the water that we don't know. I don't know the
Oh, yeah.
percentage off the top of my head that has been explored, but there hasn't been, what, like 3% of the ocean waters have been explored. That's nothing. That's like
Yeah,
nothing. So
yeah.
you think about Genesis, the chaos over the waters, right? All these kind of the Raphaim dead things were formed under the waters, the book of Job says. So there's something about the waters that's really mysterious and fascinating. And I remember when I was researching, I don't know if it was for this last podcast I did on the topic, but around the end of World War II and the sightings kind of the UFOs at that time, many of them were coming up out of the waters, up out of lakes, up out from below up. And so that piques my interest because I'm like, what's going on down there? Is there more to the waters that we don't know? And we see allusions of that all throughout scripture as well, with the Philistines and Dagon and the fish gods that they're
Yep.
worshiping. So,
Vishnu.
so
Yep.
yeah. And Pharaoh going down to the waters by the Nile. Why was he going down to the waters every morning? What was he, was it to bathe? He lived in a huge temple setting where there were waters. I got my arrows mixed up there. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm just kind of like lightly touching on it, but
Yeah.
those are the thoughts that go through my head.
Well, I've heard, I don't know if you've heard about this. I can't remember where I heard about this, but there's supposedly this lake somewhere in Nevada or in that area that goes underneath the whole state of California and goes out into the Pacific Ocean. Have you heard of that?
I have heard of that. I have heard of that. And there is a lake up where I live in North Idaho. It's Lake Pendoriel. And I think it's the second or third largest lake. And they have submarine testing there. And it's super deep. I can't remember how deep it is, but it makes me wonder, like, are there underground channels that float out to the ocean?
Yeah.
Like, is that a possibility? I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know as just civilians walking around on you know, walking around on the earth, like we have no clue what's down underneath there. So very well could be.
Yeah. Well, and that harkens back to Atlantis and what Atlantis was and what that involved. I mean, what kind of creatures were there at Atlantis? We have Aquaman, but I mean, who says
Mm.
that Aquaman has to be just fantasy? There could have been aquatic type humans that adapted to that from the Nephilim technology. And that's what puts the kink in the whole thing, is because we believe in the Nephilim technology. Well, what's the purpose of that? What is their goal? What is their end game? Their end game is gonna ultimately come to a confrontation one day in the end. And that's how I don't see how anybody could say, oh, the world is only gonna get better.
Right.
Uh yeah, there's gonna be a confrontation. The world is building up to a confrontation. And I think about that phrase at the beginning of Lord of the Rings about you could feel it in the air, you could smell it in the. I'm getting it wrong, but I had an old boss who said he was my principal when I taught school, and I would come in every year that I worked with him, and I said, "I can smell it, boss." He says, "Yep, I can too. Spring is here. You can smell it in the dirt." I don't know how to explain that. That's a southern or farmer thing, but that's I'm using that analogy is that you can smell in the air that something is afoul in Denmark. Something's going on, and it's going a direction, and we need to be aware of that direction. But
Sure.
we also need to go back to what BT said and realize that there's going to be multifaceted directions where they're trying to deceive us to think, well, I'm just confused. I just forget about it. Not even
Yeah.
not even worry about it.
Well, Brandon, you touched on the cyclical facet of things. And, when you look in scripture, it is cycles, whether you look at the seasons, whether you look at whatever it is, the cycle of life, right? That's what we call it. And it says in scripture that it's going to be as in the days of Noah. So you've got this cycle, this full return to start point. And that's why I think scripture is so amazing. It's because it's giving us little breadcrumbs to research out and seek out, because it's showing us God's not going to throw us a curveball. He's not going to hoodwink us like the Freemasons, right? Like, he's showing us what he's always done and who he is, his character.
Yeah.
And we just have to keep seeking him to really navigate that, right? And it's a walk of faith. We don't have all the answers, but he does.
Well, and we have the new covenant, so we're not like, who are the two older folks that were in the temple were waiting for the Messiah? One of them was it Anna?
Ananias,
Ira?
Zechariah.
No, not
It's
Sapphira.
Anna, and Anna was the woman.
Yeah, prophetess.
And I think
Anna
Simeon,
was-
was it Simon? Simeon? Yeah, Simeon was the.
Yeah, Simeon was the reason I brought them up is because, they knew the Messiah when he came, whereas the religious establishment had no idea. And I think that's why we need to keep our ears to the proverbial train track, because we could get deceived like that. I mean, he came the first time and nobody knew who he was. What about the second time? And we need to be aware. And Sandy and I, we talk about this all the time. And I've come to the point with Sandy, like this is what we're going to do. We're going to have a clean heart and an open heart to the Lord. And we're going to operate off peace. If we make a decision and we don't feel peace about it, then we're going to back up and figure out and pray about it until we either do or it gets less. And we've been doing that with more common things recently too. And it doesn't do us wrong. It doesn't do us wrong. And I think about that analogy of them, Simeon and Anna in the temple. I mean, they had set themselves apart. They had sanctified themselves to like the foolish virgins or the wise virgins. And I think that's definitely a parable for this time period right now is having the oil of intimacy with God, to being so close to him that, he's telling you what's going on. That's the key. I really think so.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the stories, Amy, that you've heard about these submersibles? Yeah.
It was from that show I was telling you guys we were watching, my husband and I. And it was one story was in Brazil, and they were out on this fishing ship and they saw these lights kind of coming up in the ocean and down there. And one was out by Catalina Island. Catalina is an interesting place too. So I wonder if it has to do with the regions that they're in, if it's on certain ley lines, if it's because of the previous kind of people that lived there, because Catalina, there's been Nephilim bones found there and Indian stuff. So natives. So really, I don't know, just interesting. And these people spotted these lights coming out of the waters, and these lights would move in the waters and they didn't know what it was. The people in Brazil described their experience as something was actually pulling down their boat, almost like a magnet. They described it. And again, I take Netflix with a grain of salt, but
Sure.
I think that we can kind of sift through it and see where there's, potentially some truth there or potentiality for this happening. And they cut their anchor and they got the heck out of there. And it was at night, typically at night. But I know that the Pentagon and other people have been coming in to report that the Pentagon's denying it. They're saying, there's nothing, of course, but like people are standing up and coming before. I can't think of the technical term where they come and they kind of give their report, but they are saying that they've been seeing these submersibles and UAPs, and there needs to be some people commenting on what is this? Like, we need to know what this is, essentially. So,
the Brazil one you're talking about, the Brazil one, I think I saw that. I think it's was a bunch of lights, and then they saw some kind of a humanoid type thing swimming. Is that the same one?
I didn't see that part, but
okay.
But definitely the lights below, and they felt almost like the boat was getting kind of pulled down by an unseen kind of force, like magnetically.
Yeah, that trick is always to make people think these are fabrications, illusions, imaginations, hallucinations from the brain,
right?
To cause uncertainty. It's like the ultimate gaslighting, right? It's like, you didn't see what you thought you saw. Let me flash you with this beam of light that we got from some out of town friends, the whole Men in Black thing and neuralizer. But the reality is that people have been seeing things moving in the waters, under the waters, for as long as they've been a maritime, we've been maritime people. I mean, these stories exist from the Phoenicians and beyond, and all the way up to modern times. People see things, they just don't talk about it.
Right.
And I mean, it's the reality of the situation. You did not see that, and you will not talk about it. Is a pretty common adage for military folk that are out running aircraft carriers and massive ships on the ocean. You don't talk about these things.
Yeah.
Never mind, pilots are like, yeah, we saw it on this whatever. It's like people are seeing things off the decks of ships for thousands of years, and we know biblically that the things under the waters, the stuff that comes from chaos, being some kind of, I mean, if it's sinister forces of some sort or entities. I mean, what is light other than frequency and vibration? So earlier you had talked about seeing the way we see stars through telescopes, the way they have this. Our eyes are trying to make sense of the frequency being displayed, and our eyes and our brain doesn't really have a correlating image. The best example is to draw people's minds back to the way Plato taught with the way images worked. If you could think of a tree, that's because there's like a tree in the collective unconscious of treeness. And so we all understand when someone says tree, we may picture a different tree, but we know we're talking about something that's basically wood, and we can use it for, this, that, and the other thing. Okay. Well, our brain doesn't have a correlation for a star, and there's no reason why our ancients called them the wandering stars planetes, which was basically spirits. So those were spirits that had movement in the skies, right? So they could very well exist under the waters, therefore they're spirit entities, and the way things could look physical to us can be illusory. The CIA had an experiment known as the gateway process that showed that you could make the human brain believe a physical object was real by presenting it with basically the right vibration or frequency. Therefore, you can almost sit there and go, a USO is a fabrication of an entity that understands the human brain, because gosh, man, they've been around a lot longer than we have.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think it's really interesting that I was talking with somebody the other day, and you think of the book of Enoch, and part of that was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. We know the Ethiopian book of Enoch has been around a lot longer. But my point is that we are in the generation where this stuff makes sense now. It's starting to play out in real time, where we can almost we can take it and say, you know what, share your stories, because maybe you were afraid to share them before because people wouldn't believe you. But now people are sharing, and people are like considering it, because we are in that season where we're like, you know what, this stuff is plausible. Nephilim, plausible. Giants, okay. People from aliens, oh my gosh. And it just goes to show that we are accelerating on that timeline. And I think us as Christians, we are doing a service to the body of Christ, because God is spirit, right? And he created the supernatural, if you want to call it that. He created the spiritual. And so if people aren't hearing it from Christians, where are they hearing it from? They're hearing it from the world. And this is why
Graham
you have so
Hancock,
many.
Ancient Aliens.
Right.
I mean, that's where we're hearing from. Yeah.
And that's why so many are going to the new age, is because we're spirit too. Like, we want to know why these things are happening, why we're seeing these things. And I just think that it's great that we can talk about this, and it doesn't have to be so taboo and kind of fringe and conspiracy theory,
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking, and oftentimes the reason people don't come to us, meaning Christians, is because so many of us are so dismissive of it and just have the same attitude that the world has towards it. And just, I mean, I think about abduction stories and this how dismissive people can be about those. These are very often very humiliating stories. I mean, I won't get into probes and such, and I'm just not believing everybody's making that up, even if one or two people are. I mean, it's super humiliating, some of these stories, and whatever the source is, something is happening to these people, and how hurtful it must be for people to just say, "Oh, you're just crazy."
Right.
Well, the church has adapted Western rationalism. That philosophy informs our theology. And I love the whole biblical reenchantment movement that we're now bringing back the supernatural to Christianity. And when I say that, I mean more than just the spiritual gifts, more than just, charismatic oriented things, more than just healing, but just the whole supernatural worldview that we live in an enchanted world. I think that's great. I think that's what's coming back. And Heiser was a lot of that, but there was other people even before that realized, and it's been trying to come back for hundreds and hundreds of years. But I think the enemy doesn't want to be revealed.
Right.
So
It's the time. Now's
yeah,
the time,
yes,
and
exactly. Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, usually the problem is whenever we start revealing the means modes, the operandi modus of the sinister forces, there's usually a lot of kickback and pushback on people. If you notice, it's one of the first things to get attacked during the coup crisis was, oh, those conspiracy theorists. And then now you're like watching, the medical group that's in charge, the World Health Organizations, like,
yeah.
it's like face masks cannot protect against airborne diseases and viruses. And it's like, yeah, we said that, but we were saying that first.
Yeah, I told Sandy the other day, I said, the next person I see with a mask on, I'm going to say, thank you so much because you can't shed on me and I can't get your illness. Thank you for still wearing your mask. I'm sorry, that's bad. But I mean, anyway, it's just so amazing to see people still wearing masks. But yeah.
It is.
Well, guys, anything else we want to ask Amy? Are we ready to land this UAP?
Yeah.
I think the main takeaway is we should be a little bit more aware of intentionality.
Yes.
The people who fabricate and design the way that we're supposed to interpret a story has an intention that is usually nefarious. And the more that we can sit there and stand back and go, there may be something going on below the surface. And why is this the only thing on the media at the time? Why is it across in our faces so much? And usually I tell people it's probably time to turn the television off and turn your minds back on instead of tune in and tune out.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what Amy was saying at the beginning. Yeah. There's definitely a level of intentionality that's there. But I think we were talking about frequency earlier. I think they use frequency to dumb that down inside of us as well. So, all right. Well, Amy, thank you. We love having you on the show, and another great show with you. I've been wanting to talk to you about this for a while because there's so many different views out there, and we have common friends that have different views. And they're still my common friend, but I just want to, just get a feel for what people are saying out there, particularly about the old drone stuff. Thank you, Amy.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. It really is. You guys are great.
Thank you. Thanks for listening and supporting us. And remember, stay naturally supernatural.